Speaking of nonsense, Congress, they're playing their nonsensical games and trying to pass through legislation that is, according to the CBO, going to add about $5 trillion to our debt. Now, I'm a debt hawk, and most people know that. I can't stand adding debt, but that's nonsense in itself, because about $4 trillion of that number comes from if we didn't keep tax rates the same. So I think that's not exactly fair scoring. But there is about 1.6 to 2 trillion of additional spending, leaving the tax part of it alone, the marginal tax brackets. So they're trying to make these tax brackets permanent. We know permanent is not real, but we do know that it's probably likely to run at least to the end of this decade. But there are multiple things on the amount of people that use itemized deductions, right? So the SALT
a lot of that
cap, right? State and local. So what are the provisions that you're seeing now? And of course, we've had changes in the last 24 hours, I think, right?
Yes. So we are starting to dig into this bill so that we know exactly the planning that we're going to be doing for the rest of the year. Kind of have to have a plan A and a plan B, unfortunately, for most of our clients. But the SALT deduction would be the major one. They just increased that to about 40,000
with a knockout. They call it a phase out, but it's really just knocks you out. So once you get over, I believe 500,000, at least that was a provision I saw last night, it goes all the way down to 10 grand. Now, just so you know, the SALT deduction will phase out over the by 2029. It'll be 10,000 again, at least again in the version that we saw last night. So this is a temporary relief, primarily the blue states, but it certainly helps a lot of our clients. It helps me personally, I will tell you that, here in Nebraska, because we have such high property taxes and income taxes, et cetera. And so again, that's your state and local taxes. So your state income tax, your state property taxes, et cetera. And if you pay county or sales taxes, you can include those numbers in there. And so that going up to $40,000, that could be about an $8,000 savings for a lot of dual income families listening out there. However, if you go over that threshold of $500,000, I sent you guys the math yesterday, you actually could have an effective tax rate jump up from 30% to about 54% on the difference between someone making 500 grand and 600 grand. It's a wallop.
I mean, it's those unintended consequences we always talk about.
Yeah, and so this is where Congress does. They rush, which they're doing right now, to get this, because Trump says, get it through. We need a big, beautiful bill. It's going to be wonderful. They're rushing to push it through without really thinking, what's the unintended consequences of this? And, this is the stuff that, again, why we plan so many variable outcomes for our clients behind the scenes. And I think, frankly, it'd be fun if some of your clients actually saw how many, iterations of their tax plan you've come up with. We typically only show them 2 or 3, but I mean, for some clients, we've built out 2-3 dozen, because there's so many dynamic changes, and most people don't know where the nuggets lie, the incentives in here. For instance, opportunity zones, one of the things we've used for a lot of clients to help knock out capital gains. It doesn't matter if they're selling a business, a farm, asset, what have you, right? Mm-hmm. We can defer those taxes into the future. And right now it looks like they're going to extend that, but you're still going to have a capital gain due primarily in 2 years, right?
Yep. And so, this bill, it says that it'll prevent increase in taxes for most taxpayers, 62% of taxpayers, according to the Tax Foundation. But most of the deductions that they're talking about in this bill are what we call below the line deductions, meaning it's coming on our Schedule A or itemized return. And so we were talking about that before the show started, was that the standard deduction has pretty much eliminated most filers from filing an amended.
Yeah, and this does raise it once again, the standard deduction. And this bill actually raises it for 2025. So right now we're told it's $30,000 for a married couple. This would actually put it up to $31,500, at least in the one of the things I saw this past week for this very tax year. So that's what's interesting, is when they pass these bills, and most people don't understand, sometimes it starts the next calendar year. That's the easiest way to plan, because we know the rules that we're in. This may be retro back to January 20th of this year. Now, whenever you have a retro bill, we've done it twice in our history, it changes what you did. So if you had a capital gain you experienced prior to January 20th versus after, you may have different tax calculations on those. So again, not for the faint of heart. You really have to get with someone who knows what they're doing when it comes to planning, and really integrate that with how you're investing your assets as well. What other gold nuggets have you found in there so far?
The one interesting one is we work with a lot of clients on some pretty large charitable donations using donor advised funds or CRTs. But they're going to limit the value of the itemized deduction potentially of to 35 cents on the dollar for taxpayers in the top tax bracket.
So that I don't like, because I mean, my wife and I are blessed to be able to hand a lot of dollars out to a lot of great causes and charities, and I do reside in the top tax bracket. But why shouldn't I get the benefit? That's the whole reason you incentivize someone to give to charities, because you're replacing the work that the government would otherwise have to do for society. So, but again, they're trying to find ways to chip down the cost of this. And so again, it's not for the faint of heart, which is where I think donor advised funds, though, if that goes through, will become much more popular, because you're going to want to pull more donations forward in a given tax year to get more viability from it, and then pair that with another strategy like strategic Roth integration, et cetera. So again, there's a lot of moving parts in here. There were over 84 amendments in the last 24 hours. We're recording this on Tuesday this week because I have to be out of the office, and so we don't have the final rendition. So in the next week or two, we hope to actually go through this bill a little bit deeper. So any other nuggets you've gotten there? Or?
The kind of one of the final ones that'll help some of our clients is to add a temporary senior deduction for those who are under $75,000 in income, just through 25 through 2028.
Yeah, and so basically, if you're a senior, and is it defined as 65 or 55? Do you know where they defined it in the bill?
I don't. It doesn't say here on Tax Foundation, but it does include.
And how much do they get to knock
itemized
off? So they're going to knock off another $6,000?
$6,000.
So it's an additional deduction. So that could be huge, actually, for a lot of seniors that are living on a fixed income, like a married couple that's living on, say, 50 or 60 grand in fixed income. Basically, your standard deduction could be, relatively speaking, could be as high as over $42,000 then. So that's really, really helpful for a lot of lower income seniors that are stuck on a fixed income. This could be hugely beneficial to those folks.
And then an interesting one I thought was that you're thinking about creating a permanent $1,000 above the line deduction for charitable contributions, $2,000 for joint filers. So what they mean by above the line is you wouldn't have to itemize. Right. You wouldn't have to itemize. If I make $50,000, I get to bring that down to $49,000.
Why keep it so small at 1,000 or 2,000? Why not push that number up to say, and I get it, maybe just make it say 5% of your income or 10% as the Bible teaches. And if you did actually tithe 10% of whatever that AGI was, we're going to let you take it without itemizing. So now, just to give you some information on itemization, right? So prior to 2017, we had about 33% of taxpayers itemized that year, so about a third. And they were taking advantage of a multitude of things that you can deduct, entrepreneurs, business owners, et cetera. But one of the biggest things that went away was what we call miscellaneous deductions, and it was just that. It was a wild tranche. And so real estate investors in particular used to utilize that particular line item a lot. In 2018, we dropped all the way down 11% of tax filers itemized, and last year, according to USA Facts, which is Steve Ballmer's new company, a data company, they produced a slide, and I don't have it with me today, but it was 9.3 or 9.4% of tax filers last year itemized. So 91% are just using this standard deduction. And that's probably right, though, for 90% of America. It keeps it simpler, keeps your cost to file taxes lower, simplified return. But I think that we should then push for that above-the-line deduction you just talked about. That would make more sense to me.
It would, and that way we can continue, because most clients that walk into our door are, like you said, filing the standard deduction, and we ask about that charitable, and they're like, "Well, I want to, but I don't quite see the benefit for."
Well, it's nice if you can show them the benefit, but and that's where, again, planning. If you've been really successful or a high income earner now, a donor advised fund can help you get maximum benefits for that charitable donation. But if you're in that middle income, which is we call it bread and butter retirees,
yep.
Midwest millionaires, they walk in with $1 million to $2 million saved today because the markets have done so well. And they only are asking for $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 to live on, which is not that difficult for us to plan out. In fact, we are trying to then teach them, why don't you spend a little more money, especially in the go-go years, but we have to tax plan around it, because if you don't, you get those IRMA penalties that you're going to talk about in September, and so many more. So there's so many moving parts here. The bottom line, if you want to have a competent financial plan, you need to work with a firm that is tax-centric and retirement-specific to build you out these plans. Hey, if you're looking for more content like this, make sure you check out these videos, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you'll be notified when we publish more content that will help you retire smart. Thanks for watching.